Hello and welcome to the second round of the UKOBA Offshore Powerboat Championships. This week we're in Hull, which thanks to an enterprising city council is rapidly establishing itself as the United Kingdom's #1 powerboating venue. The unrivaled facilities of the new Hull Marina, the extensive natural viewing areas, plus the unpredictability of the estuary combine to make the Humber Grand Prix just one of those irresistible venues. Practice on Saturday was eagerly awaited, and it gave the crews a taste of what they might expect the following day. One man who kept his feet firmly on terra firma during Saturday's practice was current Class 1 leader Roger Fletcher in Shockwave. Did he consider himself to be post-race favourite?
I think we should have a very good chance. It's blowing up a bit, so it'll be a bit of chop out there, even in the estuary. And hopefully we have a better reliability record than the competitors.
And so your tactics for tomorrow?
Stay with the Allenbys. We'll sort of go around fairly steadily for the first few laps and see how things progress, I think. I'm not sure whether he's probably got higher speed than we have. I think he probably has got a shade higher speed. So we'll see how we go for 2 or 3 laps, and then at the end we'll just go flat out and try and persuade him that, or try and get one of his engines to break, in which case we'll be okay.
Arch rival David Allenby did go out, but he had a slightly different view of the result.
It was quite rough. I think the small classes, the 1.3 and 2 litre boats, are going to find it quite bumpy. In fact, it was probably about a little bit rougher than ideal for us, and the boat needs a certain amount of chop to get going. But I understand that down the far end of the course there are some pretty big holes, and we're going to have to be quite careful down there, certainly. We've got a big hill to climb. Obviously, the principal competition has got more than double our horsepower. It's got twice our weight, and if the conditions are anything like they are today, then it's going to be quite a hill to climb. Yeah. So just for out and out speed, if we get a chance to use it and things hang together, yeah, we can win. Yeah.
A man who has travelled faster than either Fletcher or Allenby on water is former American drag boat champion Charles Burnett, taking part in his first national offshore race in a 400 horsepower catamaran. How would he tackle his new challenge?
Drag boat racing is fun. It can get a little boring at times, though, because it's obviously in a straight line on a flat body of water. And since I'm now more or less living in England, I thought it was time to take up something a little more challenging. And it seems to be quite a bit more challenging over here.
Because this will be your first offshore race?
Second offshore race. The first one, unfortunately, retired with gearbox trouble. The boat itself is just about the same speed that I was drag boat racing at way back 10, 12 years ago. But as you know, drag boats now are up to 180 miles an hour, a quarter mile. But it's also a more challenging race because drag racing, you fluff the race, it's all over in 6 seconds, and that's the end of the day for you. At least here I've got a good hour and a half to be out in the water.
In the 2 litre class, all eyes were on the brand new and very stylish Midas catamaran of Tony Genvy and Eric Braithwaite. But with the majority of the 17 boats in this division measuring 21 feet, why was his 27?
Well, it costs more. No, seriously, it's built of lightweight materials, aluminium honeycomb, foam, epoxies, etc., clad with plywood. Because of that, we can have a lighter boat, and therefore we've got better reach in the rougher conditions, but being light, it's still very quick in the flat as well. We've been running up in the middle 80s at the moment, and that's without putting too much into it, so we're hoping we'll be sort of getting up close to 90 before not too long.
Would you regard yourself as the favourite in the 2 litre category tomorrow?
Well, looking at the conditions, definitely not. No, we've got a lot more testing to do in sort of rougher conditions before we get it going absolutely right. But you never know. The wind may drop, and if it does, we'll be pretty hopeful. Yeah.
When Sunday arrived, the wind had decreased, but there was still a stiff northeasterly breeze, and the crews prepared for a long and bumpy ride. The course was very similar to last year, a combination of short and long laps. Firstly, a short lap under the Humber Bridge and a 6-mile return trip. Then the longer lap, taking the boats beyond Grimsby, turning at Spurn Head and back to the start-finish line. 5 laps and a total race distance of 135 miles. In the milling area, the activity increased, indicating the 2-minute flare had been fired, and all was set for the first of the 2 starts. Class 1, 4 litre and production. When the green flag went up, they were away. And it was a 4 litre catamaran, D11 Papa Kilo of Rob Mills, who went into an early lead. But the greater power of David Allenby's 36-foot Tornado catamaran soon took him past the 4 litre boats, and he led as they went towards the Humber Bridge. Building up to speeds at around 90 to 100 miles per hour, the catamaran certainly looked in great form. Behind, Roger Fletcher struggled to get the 46-foot shed-designed monohull with the 1,800 horsepower of turbocharged diesels up and running. But bit by bit, he pegged away at the lead of David Allenby. Back to the second start, 2 litre and 1.3 litre. The green flag went up and they were away and into an early lead. L27 LA Racing, Peter Little and David Arthur. C3, former Class 2 world champion Neil Holmes in second position, and C8, Carry Fast of Tony Genvie and Eric Braithwaite in third. In their wake, the rest of the 2 litre fleet tried to keep in touch, but many of them were monohulls and not suited to the flat conditions in the run-up to the Humber Bridge. But they knew that when they turned and headed out into the rougher waters of the estuary, that their day would come. Meanwhile, ahead, the lead had changed. Neil Holmes in the trimaran had just edged past C27, David Arthur and Peter Little. Holmes, former Class 2 and 4 litre world champion, was relishing the conditions. Gradually, Holmes extended his lead. In second position, it was still LA Racing, number 27, Peter Little and David Arthur. But up into third place came the 27-foot Midas catamaran of Tony Genvie and Eric Braithwaite. And as they passed under the Humber Bridge, it was Holmes in first position, Peter Little in second position, and Tony Genvie in third. Under the bridge, and they head towards the first turn mark. Still in the lead, number 3, Neil Holmes. But closing in second position, LA Racing, number 27, Peter Little and David Arthur, with Carry Fast threatening in third. The trimaran had a slight advantage here, the 3 hulls enabling the craft to turn much tighter than the catamarans behind. But Peter Little held on well, and there was very little in it as they came out of the mark and headed back towards the marina. Behind them, Clive Jones in C16 turning point was in 4th position, but the white catamaran didn't like the choppier conditions they were beginning to reach, and he was overtaken by the monohull of C52, Adrian Jardine. Clive Jones is back to racing after almost a year's absence. He was nearly killed in an accident a year ago whilst training for the Humber Grand Prix. For Jeff Purves in the 4-litre class, a miserable season continued. And as we expected, the monohull in the rougher conditions has gone past this boat, David Allenby's 36-foot Tornado. The catamaran been forced to slow down in the rougher conditions. But David Allenby played a canny game. He tucked in behind the monohull and waited, knowing his superior speed would carry him over the finishing line in first position, should he be able to keep in touch. But Roger Fletcher knows all about Class 1 racing, and he turned on that little bit of extra power that he knew that he could get from the boat. They check the course, they look over their shoulders, and know they have an increasing lead. Halfway through the race at the start-finish line, Roger Fletcher knew he had the cat on the run. But could he hold on to his lead in the calm conditions ahead? David Allenby knew that this was possibly his last chance of glory. 4 fingers from the navigator indicating that all 4 engines were on song, and he knew that this was the chance he had to take. It was also the halfway point for the 4-litre division. The ex-drag boat racer from America, Charles Burnett, was clearly enjoying a surprise lead, but there was to be a twist to the plot that would eventually spoil his party. Roger Severy and Sheila O'Hare were in second position, and the runaway leader so far in this season's racing, Rob Mills, was relegated to third. In 2-litre, it was still C27, Peter Little and David Arthur. The current 1.3-litre world champions looking good for a first victory in the higher division. Meanwhile, Charles Burnett battled on. The sea was getting heavier, but the American refused to take his foot off the throttles. Behind him, Rob Mills had gone past Roger Severy and was desperately trying to catch up. Roger Severy, meanwhile, was in third position. The 25-foot Phantom, unable to find the speed, although the conditions suited the hull. Ahead, Charles Burnett was still under full power when an unexpectedly large wave caught him by surprise. He ploughed into it and the boat started to break up. Not only was it the end of his race, it was the end of the boat, and they prepared to abandon ship. Rob Mills, who meanwhile had gone into the lead, realizing the dilemma of the crew, came back to check to make sure everything was okay before continuing in first position. Another man with problems was David Allenby. In his challenge to get past Roger Fletcher at the Humber Bridge, he'd blown 2 engines. And as he steered the boat back into the marina, he was wondering when his miserable run would come to an end.
There's a certain amount of structural damage to this engine. It's not the same as the problems we've been having for the last year or so. It's something quite different. But we lost a lot of power on it, and it was just slowly falling back and back and back and back. Eventually it stopped. And, you know, well, we didn't really see much point going around on 3 engines. We've been around for a while, so another day. Is it going well? Yeah, it was going fine until it started to break down. I think it might have thrown a rod or something like that.
With a chance?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we got the measure of the other boat on the first lap, see what their pace was like. We had more, and we thought we'd just hang around behind them and give it a blip at the end, but it seldom works out according to plan.
Meanwhile, back at the finish line, the 1.3-litre class were finishing. It was another victory for Peter Wilson and Peter Henley from Guernsey to go back-to-back with their victory here last year. In second position, last year's national champions, Glyn and Christine Grayson. next to the finish line were the 2-litre boats, and it was Tony Genvie and Eric Braithwaite who celebrated an epic victory, having got past Peter Little and David Arthur on the last lap, and a victory that'll take them towards the World Championships later this year. And there behind them, mechanical problems on the last lap had robbed the 1.3-litre World Champions of victory. In 4-litre, Rob Mills, taking advantage of the demise of Charles Burnett, recorded his 4th victory of the season. Behind them, Roger Severy and Sheila O'Hare, in a race that they might have won. And finally, the overall winner, Roger Fletcher, crosses the line and proves once again that it's reliability that wins offshore powerboat races. And as they return to the marina, I'm sure they reflected on a sequence of results that brought them victory in Guernsey and now a lead in the UKOBA Championships. So we asked Roger Fletcher how his race had gone.
Pretty good. It was actually a lot rougher out at the bottom end of the course than we expected, but I mean, for our boat, that was perfect. We just shot through it.
How rough is the weather now?
Oh, it's not that bad. It was maybe 3 foot of sea, 2 to 3 foot, that's all. But we expected to be pretty calm, really.
What sort of speed have you been moving at today?
We were doing it early on in the race when we were sort of dueling with the other guy. We were doing about 90. But when he pulled out, I don't know what happened to him. He must have had engine problems, I guess. We then were cruising round after that at about 70 or so.
He was actually sticking to your tail. He reckoned he had the measure of you and he was just waiting for his moment.
I think he's probably right. If his engines are held together, it is actually a faster boat, so he could well have been right there.
You were fairly pleased when you saw him receding into the distance?
Yes, when he started dropping back just slowly, we thought, you know, he's probably bust one of his engines. So we felt a lot happier after that.
In the lead, going great guns and really having a great time out there. There was some heavy weather down the end, but nothing we couldn't handle, we thought. Came down on our side a couple of times, no problem. And one particular wave, we came up and came down on the starboard side, at which point I saw what looked like a piece of the bow float by the cockpit after the water cleared. And I heard my navigator Ian say to me, "I think we've lost something." And we both agreed we'd lost one of the sponsons. So having determined that, we kind of popped out of the cockpits fairly quickly, and luckily we had the helicopter overhead, and there was another cougar on its way to rescue us. So we were not in too much danger, but it's an experience that certainly adds excitement to the sport, and a lot different from drag boat racing, I have to say. What happens now is we put it out to tender, see if anybody can build us a new boat in time for the World Championships. Otherwise, perhaps somebody might rent me a boat, you know. But then again, maybe not after today.
Roger Fletcher and the crew. And once again, it was Roger Fletcher and his crew who tasted success on the winner's rostrum. They also win the Global Challenge Trophy.